PMDD shaped my life for 17 years before I could name it. I spent those years searching for answers, questioning my sanity, and desperately seeking treatments that actually worked. My painful journey had an unexpected twist. Helping others heal from PMDD became my life's purpose. Hi, I'm Jess, a board-certified nutritional therapist, coach, the founder of Her Mood Mentor, and your host. This is PMDD Pep Talk, a weekly reminder that your suffering is real, your experience is valid, and your future is brighter than your symptoms suggest. Each week, we're going to explore the truths about PMDD that nobody talks about. The kind of truths that shift something deep inside you and make you think, maybe there's more possible than I imagined. Whether you're in the depths of luteal darkness or riding the clarity of your follicular phase, you're exactly where you need to be. Because here's what I know for sure. Healing PMDD isn't just about managing symptoms, it's about transforming your life. This challenge, as brutal as it can be, is an invitation to know yourself more deeply and live a more joyful, purpose-filled life. PMDD might feel like your whole story, but it's just a chapter, and you get to write what comes next. Welcome to PMDD Pep Talk. Quick pep talk pause. Remember that everything we talk about here is meant to educate and inspire. Always team up with your healthcare provider for personal medical advice. All right, now let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to PMDD Pep Talk. I'm Jess. I'm so excited to chat with you today about this topic that needs to be discussed. And it's the last week of PMDD Awareness Month, so we gotta have this combo. If you experience PMDD symptoms, you've probably tried to explain them to someone as you watch their face go completely blank. Or worse, you get the everyone gets moody before their period response, and you just kind of stood there wondering, how do I even begin to make them understand what I'm actually living with here? And that is exactly what this episode is for. Today, I'm giving you 10 kind of fun and different ways to explain PMDD. And this is really for the partner who thinks you're overreacting, the family member who keeps suggesting you just try yoga, the boss who wonders why you're calling in sick again, and the friend who says, just push through it. And we're gonna go beyond the surface level here. I want you to actually understand what is happening in your brain and your body, because when you understand it, you can explain it. And when you can explain it, you can stop shrinking your experience around it. You can start asking for help. You can set boundaries. There's so much that you can do to change your symptom experience just by communicating what you're going through in a way that lands. So this episode is for you if you have felt invisible, because PMDD symptoms are invisible. This episode is for you if you've tried to explain PMDD and felt like you failed. This episode is for you if you want the science so you can back yourself up and feel more confident talking about PMDD. And this episode is also for you if you just need to hear someone say, hey, this is real, this is why, and this is how you can talk about it. So let's go. First, we need to start with what PMDD actually is. So we're going to go through this briefly because it's really the foundation and it's where most conversations go wrong straight from the start. So PMDD is not a hormone problem. Hear that again. PMDD is not a hormone problem. Your hormones are not too high or too low with PMDD in most cases. Your hormone levels will look completely normal on a standard blood test. A lot to unpack there because there's normal and then there's optimal. But when someone says just balance your hormones, it's really showing that they're missing the point entirely and not actually understanding neurobiologically what PMDD even is. So PMDD is a brain sensitivity condition. Research describes PMDD as affecting roughly 3 to 8% of women who are still cycling with their menstrual cycles, and it is classified in the DSM as a depressive disorder. Now, that's not because women with PMDD are depressed all the time. We know that PMDD symptoms follow a cyclical nature, but because the severity of the mood symptoms meets clinical criteria for a diagnosable disorder within the depressive disorder category. So let's get into talking about GABA and why your brain loses its calm so much around ovulation during the luteal phase and presents you on a fancy platter with a host of terrible PMDD symptoms. So this is really the part that's going to change how you understand yourself. There's a hormone called progesterone. You've heard of it. You know about progesterone. Your body produces it during the second half of your cycle, the luteal phase. This is when symptoms present with PMDD. Now, as progesterone rises, it gets converted into the brain into something called allopregnanolone. Now, I know that's a mouthful, so let's just call it allo. So allo is supposed to be calming. In most women, allo acts as a kind of natural tranquilizer. It binds to GABA receptors in the brain. GABA is your brain's main calming neurotransmitter, and it promotes a feeling of calm, emotional stability, and ease. Doesn't that sound nice? Don't we want that? This is not what we're getting with PMDD, okay? Here is the problem for women with PMDD. Research published in Frontiers in Psychiatry in 2023 describes what happens differently in the PMDD brain. When allo drops rapidly in the late luteal phase, which it does because that hormonal shift is what triggers your period, the GABA system becomes destabilized. The receptors that are supposed to catch GABA and convert it to calm are not responding correctly, and instead of feeling steadied by the shift, those women with PMDD's brains become very dysregulated by the shift. Now, a 2020 review in neuroscience and biobehavioral reviews confirmed that women with PMDD actually experience a paradoxical response to allopregnanolone, which should calm the brain, but actually has an agitating effect instead. So your brain, it's not broken, but it is responding in a way that's measurable, documented, and different, according to the research. It's responding in a different way than it, quote unquote, should. So it's really not a character flaw. It's neurobiology a bit gone wrong. So let's get into the 10 ways to explain it. We're going to be practical with these. These are 10 ways to put PMDD into words for the people in your life, and go ahead and use whichever fits your situation. Some are emotional, some are clinical, some are just getting down and dirty and for real. So the first way to explain PMDD, and my general go-to, is that PMDD is a reproductive mood disorder. You can use this one with doctors. You can use this one with your HR department at your job. You can use this for anyone who needs more clinical language. PMDD is classified in the DSM, the same diagnostic manual that's used to diagnose depression and anxiety and other mental health conditions, and it's recognized by the World Health Organization. It's not a made-up condition. It is a formal diagnosis that requires 5 or more specific symptoms occurring in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, confirmed over at least 2 consecutive cycles. Option 1. Moving on to option 2. This is a common one, which is describing PMDD like PMS on steroids. You can use this one with people who dismiss it as just PMS. The research varies, but 75 to up to 90% of women with a menstrual cycle experience some sort of premenstrual symptoms, but PMDD is only affecting 3 to 8% estimated. The difference is severity. We have a separate episode on the difference between PMS and PMDD, so you can listen to that. But PMS is a few days of irritability. PMDD is 7 to 14 days of symptoms. PMS is less severe. PMDD is much more severe, enough to disrupt your job, your relationships, your ability to function. The causes behind PMS and PMDD are also different. So, I know some people are really against using the PMDD as like PMS on steroids, but it's an easy way to describe it. And if it drives with you, you certainly can use it. But there's a big difference between 4 to be exact, differences between PMS and PMDD. So make sure to listen to that episode if you want to dive into those 4 reasons. But that's the second way you can describe PMDD. The third way to talk about PMDD is like an allergic reaction to your own hormones. You can use this with anyone who asks, why can't you just push through it? So most women's brains handle the natural hormonal shift of the luteal phase just fine, but for women with PMDD, that same shift really triggers a reaction in the brain, as we said, specifically in that GABA system, that causes severe mood, anxiety, even physical symptoms. So it's not dramatic, it's documented neurological response to hormone fluctuations. So option 3, PMDD is like being allergic to your own hormones. Option 4, another way to describe PMDD, is living with PMDD is like waking up in someone else's brain. I like to use this one for partners, close friends, or family. And for that part of the month, for part of the month you feel like yourself, but for the other part of the month you really don't. Something shifts. Not really because anything happened externally, but suddenly everything feels impossible, heavy, wrong. And it's not really just sadness, it's your whole inner world changes. There's really not necessarily anything in the external environment that caused it, and that can make this even more disorienting. So that fourth way to describe PMDD is that it's like PMDD is like waking up in someone else's brain. Fifth way to talk about PMDD is that PMDD is scheduled emotional whiplash. Like this one. And we talk about this. We have a viral post on IG if you want to check it out. I'll link it in the show notes about PMDD being whiplash. But I think this one is really helpful to use for people who have watched you in your cycle. So every single cycle for 1 to 2 weeks, your nervous system goes into a state of high alert. Emotions are hitting harder. Your stress feels unsurvivable, and things that would normally roll off your back really become unbearable. Then your period arrives and that fog kind of lifts. And it's not because you got it together, but because the hormonal trigger is gone. So that fifth way to describe PMDD is like scheduled emotional whiplash. We know there's lots of research on how PMDD interacts with your nervous system, and so this is tied into this description. The sixth way to describe PMDD is like it's being possessed, but only premenstrually. Now, some of you may love this, some of you may hate this. It has some humor, but it's for someone close to you who can get down with a sense of humor and has seen you come back to yourself after a particularly hard PMDD episode or cycle. So you say or do things during your luteal phase that generally do not feel like you. You know they're not you, but then your period comes and you resurface, you feel ashamed, confused, you're trying to pick up the pieces, that pattern every single month, it's exhausting. So describing it as PMDD is like being possessed but only premenstrually is a valid way to describe it. The seventh way to describe PMDD and what it's like to live with is saying living with PMDD is like battling a monster that no one else can see. You can use this description when you are talking to someone and you really want them to understand the invisibility of the experience. From the outside, your life may look fine, but from the inside, you are likely and possibly drowning in rage, shame, anxiety, despair, painful physical symptoms. And because PMDD isn't visible, you don't actually have wounds and scars necessarily on your body, although some of us do, right? Self-harming is a big part of PMDD, but I digress. So it's not technically visible. There's not a cast. There's not a test that someone can see. There's no obvious marker. Now, symptom mapping is where this comes in, and you could use symptom mapping to bring some visibility to your symptom pattern. We have a free symptom mapping kit that you can do this, and I highly encourage you to, because that is something you could show someone with the visibility of, hey, here is what's happening with my symptoms pre-ovulatory, and here is what is happening post-ovulatory, and they can see that data on the page. This is also what you would use to get diagnosed. But it's incredibly hard to get support, compassion, or even an accurate diagnosis when no one can see an obvious marker. So this description, number 7, living with PMDD is like battling a monster no one else can see, is another good option for describing and trying to communicate the PMDD experience. Number 8, this description is going to go something like, PMDD is a monthly stress test for your entire life. You can use this one for people who have also, again, watched the impact that it's having on your work and relationships, the symptoms. So PMDD, it doesn't just affect your mood, as you know, it strains your body, your routines, your capacity to cope, your relationship. It really pushes everything to the edge. Like your career is on the edge, your partnerships are on the edge, your sense of who you even are may be over the edge. And it's repeating really on a monthly schedule, cyclically, if your cycles are regular and consistent. Now this gets harder postpartum, perimenopause, but there's still a pattern that we can try to uncover. And It's really not sustainable without support and without real interventions. So this is another way to describe how you are struggling with symptoms, and it may not be super obvious from the outside, but PMDD is a monthly stress test for your entire life. That is truly what it is, and it's a good way to describe it. Getting into the 9th way to talk about PMDD, we could say living with PMDD is like getting gaslit by your own brain. Use this one for the women in the room who need to feel seen by their partners, by their friends, by their family. This is for people who really need to understand what's happening internally, and they're maybe just not getting the gist. Living with PMDD is like getting gaslit by your own brain. During the luteal phase, PMDD can generate thoughts that feel completely real and completely true. Like you're a burden, you're unlovable, you ruin everything, everyone hates you. Then your period comes and those thoughts are gone. And you have to reckon with the fact that your brain was lying to you and you probably believed and acted on those beliefs during that period of time. Not a mental health failure, but this is what PMDD does to the brain's threat detection system and how PMDD really starts to interfere and impact our nervous system and our regulation in that realm. So research from Translational Psychiatry in 2023 found that women with PMDD show altered activation in the amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, of course, and this is specifically during the luteal phase. The amygdala works overtime and emotions are felt a lot more intensely, and they are being processed differently, really putting you into a hypervigilant state, in a fear state, believing the thoughts in your mind. So living with PMDD is like getting gaslit by your own brain is a really great way to describe PMDD and the experience. The last way to describe PMDD is like losing yourself and finding your way back every month. So you can use this when someone needs to understand the chronic nature of the PMDD experience. It's not just one hard week. It's a pattern that you've lived with for fill in the blank amount of time, probably years, maybe multiple decades like I was. It's really a pattern of losing yourself over and over and having to come back. You know, that sandcastle analogy of you build the sandcastle and the luteal phase comes in like a wave and it wipes away everything you've built and you're starting from the ground up again. It happens over and over, and it really takes a toll. And this is why support and communicating using some of these descriptors, like we're talking about here, can be so helpful. This condition, this experience is not something to continue to white knuckle through. You want to get support. You want to be able to talk to those that you love and find a way forward. So that's where we are, but it's hard to talk about PMDD, and I want you to understand why. Again, it's invisible. There's no blood test that can confirm it. There's no saliva, no urine, no genetic imaging test that can confirm it. There's no visible symptom. There's no boils and burns on your body. So from the outside, you look fine, and that invisibility is one of the most isolating parts of living with any chronic condition, but of course also with mental health symptoms. It's also cyclical, which means most people around you see you functioning normally for half of the month or maybe even more, and then struggling for the other. So they assume the good weeks are the real you and the hard weeks are a choice or a mood. Also, we have to say, PMDD does have a stigma. It sits at the intersection of mental health and reproductive health, two areas that are historically dismissed, minimized, misunderstood in healthcare. And women with PMDD are so often told it's just stress, it's just anxiety, it's just depression, it's just PMDD, you're just being too sensitive, when none of that's true. This is a DSM-5 recognized condition with a documented neurobiological mechanism. So how to use these explanations, a few practical tips here before we wrap up. You don't owe anyone a full explanation. You can share as much or as little as you want. But if you do want to share, go ahead and pick a framing that fits the relationship and use clinical language, of course, with your doctors, your employers, people who need that framing. But use metaphor and stories with partners and friends and family. Use humor if you trust the person and you like using humor to describe your experience. You can also send them this episode. You can share the research. You can go to our post on this 10 ways to talk about PMDD. You could share that with them, or you could hand them something even more personal, like your symptom mapping data, and showing them what that looks like. But more on that in a second. So you are allowed to ask for help in communicating what you're living with when it comes to PMDD symptoms. And if someone hears all of this and still dismisses you, I need you to hear this. That is information too. Okay? That's important information. So before I get to the takeaway, 2 quick things. First, if you've ever struggled to explain what your cycle actually looks like from the inside, we have a free resource, as I've mentioned, called the PMDD, the Premenstrual Symptom Mapping Kit. It walks you through how to track and map your symptoms across your full cycle so you can see a pattern laid out in front of you. And here's the thing, you can share it. We have a digital version. We have a paper analog version if you're more of a pen to paper gal. And you can hand that map to your partner, to your doctor, for a diagnosis, to your mother, to your friend, whoever needs to understand what you're actually living with. This visual representation of your actual experience is a lot more powerful than anything you could say out loud. So you can grab it in the link below in the show notes, that free symptom mapping kit. Second, if this episode helped you, it would mean a lot if you took 2 seconds to support the show. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe. It generally helps more women find our content. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, wherever you tune in, take a quick moment to leave a rating or a review. It really takes less than a moment and it makes a real difference in helping other women who are suffering find these conversations. So takeaway time. Here is what I want you to walk away from this episode, okay? You've probably been told you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you're too difficult. Okay, you're not. Like we said, you are experiencing a condition that is neurobiologically documented with measurable changes in brain chemistry and how your GABA receptors respond to hormonal shifts and how your amygdala processes emotion during the luteal phase. On and on, we can keep going. That is real, and you deserve people in your life who take it seriously. So your action step from this episode is to pick one person in your life who needs to understand PMDD better. And then choose from our 10 framings from today and try it out. You don't need to have the whole conversation perfectly. You just need to get started with it. You really deserve to be seen in your experience. And I hope this episode gave you some tools to start making that happen more easily for you. That was a bit hard to say, but thank you so much for being here. If you found this helpful, again, please share it with someone you know who is still trying to explain herself to the people around her. She needs to hear this too, and I will see you next time.